Hello, my name is Sean Smith. I'm your co-host, and this is the Website 101 podcast, the podcast for people who want to learn more about building and managing websites. I'm here with Mike Milla and Amanda Lutz, my co-hosts. Hi, guys. How's everybody doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
We're back.
Yes,
we're back.
It's great to be back. We've got a number of episodes planned for the upcoming season, and we're really looking forward to recording and sharing with everybody.
Congratulations, friends, on making it to season 8.
Season 8.
It's hard to believe it's been that long and that many episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not a lot of people have podcasts that last. Everyone has a podcast these days, but not many of them last this long. I think that's impressive.
I remember when I set this up that I saw something about the average number of episodes for a new podcast before it fades away is somewhere like 10 to 13. So
Episodes? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean it is a lot of work, and honestly, I started it alone, but I would not be here if I was still alone. I really need to share the workload with you guys. You guys help keep it going because there's just so much to do.
There is. And also, I mean, I've tried to, so for new listeners, we also have a Lunch Bites, which is a YouTube live that we do on the first and third Wednesday of every month. And over the summer, especially, people are on vacation, people get busy with work. I've tried to do one of two of those Lunch Bites like solo, and it's just clicking a button. Like there's zero production effort behind that. But sitting there and trying to think of a topic and ramble to yourself and trying to make it relevant and entertaining and not getting any feedback and any communication and back and forth. And it's hard just talking into a void. So Sean, kudos to you for keeping it up on your own as long as you did.
Yeah. Monologues are tough. Oh, and speaking of Lunch Bites, there is a Lunch Bites scheduled for the day after this episode is scheduled to be released. So we release on Tuesdays. Then this one's scheduled for November 19th. There should be a Lunch Bites on November 20th. So if you're listening, here's a real reminder. Tomorrow, there's a Lunch Bites. Come and listen to us.
Yeah. And it's already set up and scheduled on YouTube. You can go find us right now, Website 101 Podcast on the YouTube channel. Go subscribe and get ready for tomorrow's live.
Yeah, and
watch the back episodes.
As always, we will include a link in the show notes. So today, our topic is keeping up with tech trends and the relentless pace of new technology and improvements to existing technology. So listeners may know that our favorite CMS is Craft CMS, and I'm going to bring up something that they do. They relentlessly update the CMS. Every week there are updates released, whether it's a security update or new features or bug fixes. They're not a CMS that does it once a year. It's every week, every couple of weeks. You got to keep up with that. And it's not just that. I mean, there's different kinds of frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, CSS frameworks, AI, all of these things.
Yeah, lots of topics to get into, but before we overwhelm our listener and it's just already trying to head in the sand, which is totally what I do when I'm overwhelmed, let's just break it down one topic at a time. First, I want to talk about, like Sean started to, the content management systems. There are so many options and there are so many best for the end user, best for the content editor. How do you, I'm going to put out a hypothetical. Let's assume that Craft did not exist, even though, please, universe, don't let that happen. We all like Craft. Yeah. But Sean, Mike, if Craft didn't exist, what would you do to pick a new CMS?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I want Mike to go first.
Okay, well, and like you said, there are a whole bunch of different things to consider in making that decision. There's how flexible is it for me to develop the site? How user-friendly is it for admins to manage the site later? There's longevity of is it, are they going to go bankrupt tomorrow? That whole thing that clients sometimes worry about.
Yeah.
plugin ecosystem? Is there a lot of extendability, whatever the word is, to like make it more than it already is? All that kind of stuff is something to be considered. And, I find, Sean, just before you answer that question, I find one of the things I'm constantly getting trapped into is once I find a CMS I like, I use it all the time. It used to be Expression Engine. I used it for years, as you all did as well. And that was the only CMS I would ever use. Then I moved to Craft and I started realizing, there's all these other CMSs, Statamic and stuff like that. And now I just find I use Craft pretty much all the time. And I worry that should I be branching out more or, anyway, I'd like to know your thoughts on that. But Sean, first, how do you evaluate a CMS if Craft didn't exist?
I am going to respond to your thing at the end of my bit. How would I respond, or what would I look for is, number one is community. I want a good developer community. That's more important to me than anything else.
Agreed.
Because I want to be able to talk to somebody best practices. I want to know that the CMS is going to continue to exist and grow and people care about it. A non-toxic community. So Craft CMS is probably the best online community that I have ever been in.
Craft doesn't
exist.
Craft doesn't exist
in this world.
Yeah, but my point is, I don't know another one that is quite as good as that. Okay, so community, very, very important. Second, documentation.
Documentation, yeah. Right.
Documentation is really important. I think Craft docs are good, but they're not great. There's better documentation out there. So that's their only weakness in my opinion. And as Mike said, I want to have extensibility, whether it's plugins, modules, or things like that. And finally, author experience, so that my clients can enjoy using it. There's no point in building them a website with a CMS if they don't enjoy or find it easy to update their content.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and to address Mike's point at the end about only using one CMS.
Yeah.
I too am like that. It was Expression Engine, and then I dabbled in Statamic. And then I dabbled in Craft for a while before I finally switched over to Craft. I think as a solo developer, it's very hard to be proficient, let alone an advanced user in more than one CMS. And I just don't have the brain power to keep a working knowledge of two different CMSs in my repertoire. Like I worked on an Expression Engine site earlier this summer. Yeah, I'm familiar with all of their concepts, but I haven't worked on EE in a few years. So I had to reference the docs and things like that. I was unfamiliar with some of the plugins that were in use or the best practices or what's popular or what's not. So there was a lot more work for me to do because I'm not familiar with it. I think for an agency, if you've got a developer team, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 developers, you could specialize in 2 different CMSs for targeting 2 different types of clients. Maybe a smaller client and one that needs a more bespoke options. So that's my thoughts on it. Amanda, what do you think about that?
Everything that both of you have already said, I absolutely agree with. Security as well. It needs
100%.
needs to be secure, even if it's like, and every CMS does their best with security. Obviously, nobody wants anything to ever be hacked. And I always think that it comes back to making sure that the client is reassured that even if it's only a website for, the mom and pop shop around the corner and it's just a little brochure site, for some reason, security is like always top and foremost in their mind as well. So I think that having a well-established CMS that has, I prefer one that's been around the block, that's been around, that has like the good community group and good people working on it. But I also think that it's easier to see if they've had any security issues. So I'm not saying that I would never check out like a brand new development, but I probably would feel more comfortable with something that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
I'm on board with that. And a little side note about the security things. As a developer, you should be updating your client sites as often as possible, especially if there's a critical security update. I strongly encourage quarterly maintenance for all websites.
I'm really bad at selling my clients on that. I'm usually very much just, and sometimes to sell them on the project, I'm like, we're going to make it once and you're going to have it, and then the project is done.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to sell them on at least
which is not right.
A maintenance
Mike
one.
and Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least a maintenance thing where you keep it up to date, and if not, then also keep working with me, and we'll keep adding features to the site, kind of thing. That's the next level.
Yeah. Like earlier this summer, I rebuilt a site from Craft 2 to Craft 5, and it was like a complete rebuild, just because there was no path forward. Yeah. I pushed the maintenance contract. Client's like, yeah, maybe, and I have to follow up with them. It's been 2 months, and it's like, come on. They were interested, but they didn't want to start it right away. And it's like, yeah, but you're going to end up in the same situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's step away from content management systems, because what else? What else is constantly always growing, changing, and evolving is the front-end framework. And whether it's a CSS framework like Bootstrap or Tailwind, or if it's like a more advanced framework like React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Swifty, Nuxt.js, there are so many, and I super get overwhelmed. Even sometimes talking about, like, Sean, with your starter, don't you use, it's not a front end framework, but don't you use, like, you used to use Gulp to set it up, and now you're using different things, and quite frankly, there's a lot of times where I just tune out. It's like too many buzzwords being thrown at me. How do you guys cope with that?
Tune out.
Yeah.
You nailed it. Like, seriously, like, I have a high level awareness of things, but until I have a problem with my existing setup, I'm not looking into it deep. So you mentioned things like Gulp, and this is my build process. I don't use Gulp anymore. I was really happy with Gulp for a while, but it was slow. And then people were talking about Laravel Mix, and you know it'll make your site build faster, or like the compiling faster. I finally switched. It was a hassle to switch all my projects over and get everything the way I wanted it. Been using it for a few years now. I'm aware of Vite and that it's even faster. But guess what? Laravel Mix is not slow, and it's not slow enough that it's creating a problem and I want to switch. So if I end up having a problem, or maybe Vite or another one of these things has a feature that is must-have for me, then I'll look into it. I don't have... My focus is on getting business, not on learning new technology.
Yeah. Well, even just how you said that, it's like until something comes out that solves your problem better, or that has a better feature, I don't even know that I have time to be paying attention to all of the new features that all of these different development frameworks have available for us, so that I know when it's time to start to look into. So, quite frankly, Sean, I just copy your stuff. I think I started using the Laravel Mix.
Laravel Mix.
Yeah.
I use that too.
And I only use it to, like, have the browser refresh.
Oh,
when I save,
I can help you out with that, because yesterday.
Do I care?
No, because it's even lighter weight. Yesterday, I was working on an old site with Bootstrap 3 and Sass with no build process. All it has is Compass. And so I was like, all right, I can't handle this anymore. We're building new sections. Got approval, and I've added Tailwind to the site. Part of that was like, I need it to compile, and I want the browser to refresh. A little bit of AI work. 10 minutes later, I have an NPM script. I just run npm run start, and boom, it does everything. It's a much lighter weight setup than the full Laravel Mix thing.
Yeah, but if it's not broke, why fix it? That's another way to look at it.
Yeah.
I need the whole thing already, because it's an existing site, so that's why.
Yeah.
Anyways, go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. So yeah, before we like dive too deep, I wanted to kind of keep this episode a little more high level before we dive too deep into any specifics. I want to reference our user. Hey, we have a whole episode in a previous season about imposter syndrome and getting overwhelmed and how it affects everybody and how to try to overcome it. So we'll add a note add a link in the show notes to that previous episode.
It's episode 4 of last season, season 7. It's called Motivation, Burnout, and Imposter Syndrome, and it's with our friend Kevin Nicholson. He's the guest on the show that episode.
Mike already has all that
episode.
information.
That was a good one.
Yeah. So then, where do the two of you find your tech news? Do you have any resources that you find you keep going back to?
Couple of Discords that I go to, mostly craft Discord, but I do go to a front end Discord once in a while, and then the Syntax FM podcast.
Yeah, I usually get my news from podcasts. I don't use social networks anymore, and so I don't get news that way. It's almost always just podcasts that I listen to, stuff like that, where they start talking about this or that technology. That's how, like, I use Tailwind for CSS, and that's one of the few ones where I started hearing about it so much from people that I respect that I thought I better try this thing out, even though it was Foundation I used at the time was my CSS framework, not to get too technical again, but I started using it because I heard about it, and that's why I switched. But yeah, it's usually just people in the industry I respect and what are they doing these days, that kind of thing.
I have to say that instead of people I respect, I'm on Reddit a lot. Reddit is almost the only social platform I'm on anymore, and I do subscribe to the /webdev. And so it's like I like to just kind of keep an eye on the questions that come up, and so like what's the technology that might be confusing. And so very often people will get on there and be like, I'm starting a new project, like what framework should I use, what front end should I use, what server should I host on. So it's nice to see like more of a majority opinion. I think that it likes to kind of keep things balanced between what everyone's using and if it matches what the trusted professionals are suggesting.
That's right.
I also think it's kind of important to pay attention to what your friends and colleagues in the industry are using. So but working for ourselves, it's hard to know what colleagues are using, right? Yeah, but that's kind of why we have this Slack chat that we're all a part of here in Toronto. And we talk about these things. Like there's another guy in Ottawa, I won't name him, but he uses Expression Engine, and then he really loves to try out new technology, and he's really good at it. Powers to him. I learn about new stuff from him, but I don't always use it.
Yeah.
It's good to have friends like that. They'll do all the testing for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of, we're getting into code a little bit here. I want to talk about a big thing that's happening these days, which is the actual code editor that you use to write code. So for the longest time, way back, it was Sublime Text I used to use, I think. And then after that, I moved to VsCode, Visual Studio Code, which is a Microsoft product.
There were ones in between. I used Atom for a while. I used Notepad++ for a while.
I used Notepad++ also.
Yeah, and then from that I moved to Visual Studio Code, and I am currently, I don't like to pay for things, Amanda's super cheap, but I am currently paying for GitHub Copilot with Visual Studio Code.
I've been paying for Copilot as well for about 2 months or 3 months now.
I bit the bullet and paid for the year because it's cheaper.
Yeah, well, you know what? I might switch to the year one because I can see that I'm going to continue to use it, but I'm not going to switch to the year until I make that decision about Cursor. I'm interested, but the cost of switching, and it's not financial cost, it's the time cost that I'm concerned about. Mike,
so
let's hear about your journey.
Cursor is big news right now. Mike, do share.
Right. Okay, so VS Code is usually the industry standard pretty much these days. It's a very great editor that people use, and they've implemented GitHub Copilot because Microsoft owns the whole thing. and it lets you do AI stuff in there, and it can help you write code and this and that. And it was great. I was using that too. And then the big news, the new thing everyone's talking about was an app called Cursor, which was a forked version of VS Code. Someone forked it, made a copy sort of thing, which you're allowed to do. And then they implemented AI directly into it. So you don't have to subscribe to GitHub Copilot specifically. And it gave you all these advantages, like Copilot lets you use,
There's 4 different ones. I was looking at it yesterday. 4 different.
That's
AI.
because they changed though. Initially, there was one AI model that you were allowed to use, and it was a GitHub, the ChatGPT one that they use. I can't remember which one it was. And then Cursor came out, and it lets you switch between Claude and all these different AIs that you might prefer to use.
I was using Claude yesterday.
Yeah. So, and then anyway, this is why I switched to Cursor, and I just thought it was a better experience. And that's what I'm using now. And then I see you guys are funny. You guys are talking about your subscriptions. When I signed up for it, I was told if you sign up for a year, I think you save like $50. It was quite a lot of savings. And I was like, I don't know, because I'm not sure I'm committing to this yet. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because the next day GitHub put out they did their conference or something, and basically announced that they're going to incorporate everything that Cursor was already doing into Copilot. So like they're trying to one up each other, So obviously that's why they do these year things, like sign up with us, so you don't leave, that kind of thing.
Well, I signed up for the year with Copilot because I had not heard of Cursor. Like this was like a few months ago now. And I was and again, everyone uses Visual Studio Code. Everyone's talking about Copilot. If it's going to save me some money, fine, I'll pay for the year. And then like literally 2 months later, everything is about Cursor. So now I am kind of kicking myself in the ass. But now, Mike, that you've said that, tell them what you heard on the Syntax FM podcast.
Yeah, so that's where I get a lot of my news from podcasts. And Wes Boss and damn it, I always forget the other guy's name. What's his name? Steve?
Chris Ferdinandi?
No, the other co-host of the show.
Oh, Wes Boss and the dude's from Colorado. I can't remember his name.
Anyway,
I'll find it. Anyway,
Scott.
So you were saying.
I was listening to there you go. I was listening to that podcast, and they were talking about Cursor and everything else. And they have both switched, and they went to that conference, and they talked about all kinds of features that are being built in. And it's kind of like we're in a situation where it's a good position to be in as a consumer like us. We can kind of just wait and see who wins, you know what I mean? Or bounce back and forth between them. And it works out pretty well. And I just want to say, Amanda, you were talking about, you signed up earlier for the yearly thing or whatever. Listener, if you're concerned about all this stuff we're talking about, should I be using Cursor? Should I be using, Copilot with whatever? My position, I don't care what you use. Doesn't matter. Use whatever you're comfortable with. I do recommend you start using AI in your code editor in some form. Like get an editor that has it, whether it's Copilot or Cursor or something, because AI will really help your coding experience. But beyond that, who cares what you use? That's my take on it.
I'm with Mike on this, and it's not just about code editors. It's about all the hardware. Windows versus Mac, who cares? As long as it works for you and gets the job done and you can deliver to your clients, that's all that matters. If you want to use Notepad++ or hell, just WordPad, and it works for you, that's kudos to you.
Yeah. Well, and it's so even just now when you were talking about all of the different AI platforms that GitHub Copilot now uses, it's like, I don't know the difference between them. I'm not going to research which one is better, and I'm just going to use whatever one comes default until one of my colleagues tells me, to change a setting that a different one's better. And I feel like this is happening not just with code and not just with text editors, but also with, there are so many AI platforms for enter a prompt and it'll create a 30-second video, enter a prompt and it'll create an image. And it's just, there's so much happening right now by so many different companies that some of them in the long run, some of them are going to be successful and some of them are going to fail and go away. And so in the meantime, exactly like what Mike said, listener, get in, start playing with it, learn how to become comfortable with it. It's a tool like anything else. Use it as a resource. You still need to know how to work it and what to do with that information once you've got it. But get comfortable with it now. It's not going anywhere. And eventually, like right now we're in the wild, wild west. Eventually there is going to be a smaller handful that are the standards.
Yeah. And I want to go back to the AI a bit. Earlier this month, I think it was this month, in Slack, Mike mentioned that he uploaded a screenshot or a design to AI in Cursor, and Cursor spit out the code in a working website. I was like, that's amazing. So I was in Copilot yesterday, and I had a brand new design that I need to do for a new section of a website, and I couldn't upload anything, and I switched the browser and the engine. I said, hey, can I upload it? How do I upload an image to have you do this? And he said, I can't currently do that. And I was like, okay, all right, you can't do that in the browser, but I could have gone to the Claude.ai website and done that, because you can upload an image there. I have a different story about that. But instead, all I did was like, hey, listen, I described the layout, and then I said, I also want this section to use a swiper slider, and I want the buttons, the controls on the bottom right corner, and an image on the left with a testimonial on the right. How do I do that? And it spit out mostly working code. And I think in the future, for me, I would instead just say, hey, give me the swiper starter code. And it'll grab it from the docs, spit it out there. I don't have to switch to Google, search for swiper, search their docs, copy and paste. Instead, AI just spit out the code sample from the docs. And so that's a good way to do it. You don't need the whole image to website thing.
Yeah.
Besides that, I'm still not fully trusting of the quality of the code that it may spit out as well.
No, like I said, it's a resource.
Still early days.
Use it like any other resource. You still need to review the content it gives you. You still need to look at the image that it generates for you to make sure that people have all of their fingers. You still need to, like, it is early days, and we still need to monitor the output that it gives us, and we still need to know what to do with it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, Sean, you made a good point earlier when you said, your job is to bring in business, not to necessarily experiment with a million different tools. And so just use whatever is working and that kind of thing. I fully agree with that. And I think the key to using AI in this Wild West, it's moving so fast, is try to be mindful of how it can save you time in your job. So like if you've got business to do, bring in business or build sites or whatever, have a think about what can AI do for me that's going to make this simpler, whether it's build a slider element or anything else, like even just brainstorming. There's a million things it can do for you. So don't avoid that stuff, I would say.
Yeah. Slightly off topic, but still on Claude AI. Listeners may know that I am an avid amateur photographer. So I uploaded 4 of my images to Claude, and then I asked it, please tell me something about the photographer and the style of images that
Very
I
nice.
uploaded. Because I saw somebody else said, hey, I did something similar. And it spit out about 600 or 700 words discussing the stuff. Now, it was all very generic and whatever, but it was an interesting experiment. So you can try different things like that. And over the coming months and years, AI is definitely going to improve, but the key is it's not a human. So you're not going to get an emotional response, which is what you would want from something like photography or art related.
Well, but even some like generic description like that, you could go through and edit it and pare it down to come up with like a half decent bio. everybody
Yeah.
hates writing bios about themselves, but they're like, this is again another example of AI coming up with content.
Oh, I recently spoke at the .1 craft conference here in Toronto, and I needed to have a description of my top, and I workshopped it with AI to get the one paragraph description, so that I was
That's
really
great.
happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
wrote,
actually,
I wrote my initial thing, and then I said, went through 2 or 3 rounds with AI. Please fix this or make it more formal, less formal. How do I, improve it? And yeah, that was a good way, and I'm glad Amanda brought that up to remind me about that.
speaking of the craft conference that we all attended there, .1 here in Toronto, there was a talk there by someone who works with Mostly Serious, which is a web dev company. And he gave a talk about AI and how they use it. And one of the cool things that they said they do is I forget all the tools they were recommending we use, but one of them, they dumped in all of their documentation about their company, basically. And then whenever they get word of an RFP that they might respond to, they put it in there and they ask AI to spit out a percentage value for how, appropriate it would be for them to respond to that RFP. How likely is it they might win it? And it might say, oh, you're 61%. And they might go, oh, we're not going to go after that one. But if it's like 80% or more in terms of the amount of services they offer relative to what they're asking for, then they go after it. And that's a great use of AI, I think, right there.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. That is going to save you tons of time, because now you don't have to, and you're not going to have to spend as much time reading the RFP and thinking about your company and analyzing, like, is it worth it? And you might put time into writing an RFP for a client that is not as worth it.
Yep.
And as we all know, writing those kind of things is just like soul-suckingly
Awful.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yes.
It's hard work. It's the hardest thing about being a self-employed person.
All
We
right,
have an
my
episode
friends.
about RFPs as well.
Yeah, we did one, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, my friends, I think it's time to wrap this up. Listener, again, welcome to season 8. Somebody tease our listener with stuff that's coming up this season.
Yeah, we had a bunch of topics that we were going to address in future episodes. One was this whole WordPress nonsense that's going on right now. We didn't mention WordPress explicitly on this show today, but that's obviously one of the CMSs that a lot of people would end up choosing. We know that there's a controversy happening with Matt Mullenweg doing a bunch of crazy stuff.
We'll
dig
address
into
that.
Yeah, on a future
I think
episode.
so we've got ideas of, I think we were going to try to bring back our lawyer friend, David Canton.
Yep.
We were going to maybe bring on an accountant to talk about, some money matters, which would be useful for independent developers and also for small business owners out there who are listening. Then we had a couple other cool topics.
Yeah, like we did web hosting way back in season 2, I think, or season 1, but we're going to revisit it with another owner of a different web hosting company. Things have changed since then. It's always good to get some, an updated view on something that is so integral to your job.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we think we might talk about some requests that we've had from listeners regarding the onboarding process, project hacks, things like that. So keep on the lookout. Subscribe,
Lots
tell
of
your
stuff
friends.
to look forward to.
Yes. And in the meantime, of course, there is Lunch Bites. First and third Wednesday of every month. We will see you on the YouTube.
And a recap.
Awesome.
If you're listening to this on the first day it gets released, tomorrow. is a lunch bites.
Okay.
All right.
Good to talk to you guys. Bye.
Looking forward to
Bye.
the next episodes. Bye.